What else is there to say about The Emperor's New Groove? This is Joey T from the Cartoon.P giving you my full thoughts on the movie Emperor's New Groove, because if you've watched the Cartoon Palooza video, you might notice that there isn't too much analysis in it. That's because I felt like I wanted to take a different approach with how I'm making my videos, and specifically for that movie in particular, because like I'm starting out this video, how do I talk about this movie? And I got the Patreon request back in April, and I'm not saying the movie is bad. I'm just saying there's so much that's been talked about this movie. I feel like everybody knows a lot about this movie. What can I do differently? That honestly, I figured I'd take myself out of it. I think back to what I used to do when I first made Cartoon Palooza videos, and that was to just go for yucks. So that's what I did. I made a video that focused on the jokes. But like I said, this is sort of like my compromise, so that if you want to know like my full thoughts on the movie, I'll be posting a second video, hopefully not all the time, maybe not, to give you my full thoughts on The Emperor's New Groove. So the movie came out in the early 2000s, and I had to have been maybe like 8 years old around that time, give or take, maybe third or fourth grade, 8 or 9 years old maybe. I mean, I don't know specifics. All I know is I was young when the movie first came out, and I don't think I was like most people who first saw the movie and didn't know what to expect, because this was very different from what Disney usually does. Even so, it's got the same tone, same type of tone as like Aladdin or Hercules, but from the advertisements, it just looked like something completely different. It really looked like Disney was trying to remake the Looney Tunes. Even when you're watching the movie, there's like specific nods to like Chuck Jones cartoons, like characters that put on the fedora, walk away sort of deal. And it was very different for a lot of people. However, for me, the child, the intended audience for the movie, I didn't mind it, and I actually thought it looked really cool. And then when I saw the movie, and even I still quote it, I love the movie. I wouldn't say it's like my favorite Disney animated movie of all time, but I did make a countdown years ago, and I put The Emperor's New Groove. At the time I made the video in the past, I made a video called The Top 5 Post-Renaissance Disney Renaissance animated films. The Disney Renaissance being the time period when Disney was releasing Aladdin, The Lion King, and then afterwards they went through a slump. But then I made a video arguing that it wasn't necessarily bad, which is kind of ironic considering that only a few years after I would post that video did we get Frozen, Big Hero 6, Wreck-It Ralph, Moana. We would enter a new Disney Renaissance without me knowing. Maybe I'll consider that in the future. Maybe make a redo of that list. Who knows? We'll see. But long story short, I encourage people to vote on the countdown, and a lot of people chose The Emperor's New Groove as being like their favorite post-Disney Renaissance animated film, despite the fact that it was like completely different from what they normally do. A lot of fourth wall breaking. I mentioned in the video that Cusco, David Spade's character, is essentially Deadpool. And no joke, he kind of is. So as far as what the movie's about, it is about an emperor of an ancient Mesoamerican land, and he gets everything he wants, but then finds out that his actions bite him in the butt, gets him caused the big change. He turns into a llama. From his hilarious advisors, which I'll get to in a little bit, and he has to rely on a peasant who he forced out of his village. You know, him and his whole neighborhood forced out of their village, which as a kid I didn't think much about, but as an adult, there's a kind of a nice commentary to what people do like with gentrifying neighborhoods. I don't know. That's something I think, that's the adult things I think about as of now. The things I didn't think about as a kid, but I think about now. It's like that's actually kind of dark, and it's got kind of a nice commentary to it, and it also kind of relates to the idea that Disney can be seen as this empire that's sort of taking over smaller things, more so today than we give them credit for. But like at the time, I didn't think much about it, but as an adult, that's pretty dark, and it's kind of effective. As far as the characters go, the Emperor is played by David Spade, and I mentioned this in my countdown video years ago that it's essentially David Spade. You can't go wrong. It is who it is. You know, you can't take David Spade's voice out of that. It's like Robin Williams and the Genie. They're just so intertwined. The same goes for the Emperor, Cusco, and David Spade. And that goes for the rest of the cast too. John Goodman does a good job. Probably the weaker, but not necessarily worse, but a little bit weaker than the other cast. And then that leads to Eartha Kitt, who I'm just gonna say, you know, as of recently, I've just appreciated her as this big feminist icon. Something I didn't know about when I was younger, but as an adult, I find out more about Eartha Kitt, and she's a very fantastic woman who's overcome many things. And probably for a lot of people, this was her introduction. I didn't grow up with the Batman TV series, so for a lot of people like myself, this was our introduction to Eartha Kitt. And the same for Patrick Warburton. I'm almost positive Patrick Warburton before this was given bit roles. You know, he was doing Family Guy, but he was doing bit roles for TV and movies. This had to have been the movie to like get him to for people to recognize Patrick Warburton. I mean, he's still not a big household name, but I know for certain that this is the movie that got people knowing who Patrick Warburton was, because Patrick Warburton as Kronk is just it's so perfect. The connection between Yzma and her henchman Kronk is just hilarious. She's uptight, he's lets loose. It's the perfect duo dynamic, making for one of the best Disney villains, humorous Disney villains, right up there with like Hades. You know, very enjoyable to watch. And the animation itself, very fast paced. I found out, and I mentioned this in the video too, that the animation was not what it was supposed to turn out to be. Like the movie was supposed to be something completely different. It was supposed to be a big, grand spectacle musical in line with like The Lion King or Aladdin. But the problem was the studio didn't know what they were going for, didn't know what the filmmakers were going for, so they tried to go for a comedic edge until ultimately they just realized that more of the focus should have just been on the comedy, that they scrapped out and the majority of the film was like in pre-production. Yeah, making an animated film, you have to like create a movie before making another movie. They essentially have like storyboards, full animatics, full scenes, fully animated, and they just got rid of and went for something completely different. Leads to a great documentary called The Sweatbox, which is kind of funny because as far as the agreement to make the documentary actually had to do with Sting. Believe it or not, when the movie was first coming out, even in the commercials, I remember seeing Sting's name. I didn't know who Sting was as a kid. I didn't listen to the Police, so I didn't know who Sting was. But I always remember Sting being advertised. But I found out later on that Sting had a bigger role in sort of being like the Elton John to the Lion King and making the songs and the narrative to the songs, and that he had his, I believe, his wife work on, who was a documentary filmmaker, agree with Disney that they needed to make a documentary showing the experience of making a movie, but it only turned out that it turned out for the worse, and that most of the songs that he wanted to use weren't even used in the movie. I do remember when they promoted the movie in the Disney Channel, they had a music video for Walk the Llama, which was a song Sting wrote, and was not even used in the movie, but we saw that music video, and I even remember it being on the DVD's special features. But you know, to justify what the animation could have been to what it was now, they did a really good job. Like I said, I think the focus was to just make it very zany and cartoony, and I think a lot of that had to be a studio decision because the movies that were going to be popular around that time were more focused on comedy. I think at the time this movie came out, we had Toy Story, Bugs Life. Pixar movies were more focused on the comedy aspect while also giving out a good story, that I think Disney at the time realized we can't really do princesses and big musical numbers. We got to do something a little bit smaller scale. And for all intents and purposes, I think it worked out pretty well. I think it did. The animation looks really good. They really consistent with what they wanted to do, and really it turned out to be a really great project. I would say like my only problems with the movie would probably be certain things that you think upon, but this to me might be nitpicking because I still think the movie is still pretty strong. Um, the fact that there are a lot of things that Cusco, he breaks the fourth wall, he explains to the audience what's going on. But I really thought about this, and this could be a reason why the first draft of this movie, Kingdom of the Sun, didn't work, which was there's a lot of big concepts that they want to utilize in the movie that by having Cusco explain it to the audience would make more sense because one of the notes in Kingdom of the Sun was that everything was just very vague and it was very hard to explain or too deep, too philosophical. And it just took away from like regular character development and whatnot. So for the biggest draw is that they needed to find ways to just get to the point and explain it to the audience, and in some ways that takes away because there are certain things that get over explained, like David Spade explaining who Pacha is, or explaining who Yzma Kronk is, things that we could just pick up on our own, but at the same time add to his character, which is to be this sort of Deadpool Bugs Bunny type. But I don't know. For me, I think it could be a little distracting, and I could see that being a problem. And really, that's my only negative about this film. I still think it's a very strong effort from Disney, and really, I just feel like it's worth me talking about because I know a lot of people do like hearing my thoughts on these movies. Not to feel like I'm depriving you of my actual analysis. That's what I think about the movie. Comment below. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the Cartoon Palooza video. It's always fun making these videos, and have a great day. Take care.